All right. Looks like we got a light crowd tonight, but we'll blame it on the weather. That's what. So welcome to the TriLUG meeting. We're actually having an unmeeting tonight, which I'll go over in just a minute what that means. For our meeting tonight, please, we'd appreciate it if you put your phones, pagers, other electronic devices and whatnot behind the TV back there.
Wherever you like.
Okay.
Just stop moving around.
Okay. Anyway, electronic devices on silent, please. We have membership forms available. Barry, are you handling that this time?
Yeah, I can, yeah.
Okay. Our
They're
chairman.
outside on the bottom outside.
Okay. Our chairman, Barry, will have them out there when we have pizza here in a few minutes. Membership is free. It enables you to, it's a badge of honor, I suppose. It gives you a login on our Pilot, on our logins over Pilot, email account, web space, etc. You can also join the mailing lists and our IRC channel. Although it doesn't require membership strictly for that. After the meeting, we will be heading to Bada Wings. You'll see on the map there, we're down at the bottom. Bada Wings up at the top. It's just around the corner. At the Mission Valley Shopping Center. They've got local beers on tap, good opportunity to sit and talk tech with your fellow geeks and just kind of have a good time in a less formal setting. Come on. There we go. We are a volunteer organization. We are in the process of getting our 501c, which means makes us a charitable organization. We survive on donorships and sponsorships and donations. There is a donation bucket that will be out there when we have the pizza. Please toss in a few bucks to help support our various expenses going forward. And if your employer would like to get their presence known in front of a bunch of technical professionals in the area, they can contact the steering committee, which I'll introduce here in a second, about sponsoring the meeting. Get the logo up here, and we'll give them 10 or 15 minutes in front of the group to pitch the product or go through the recruiting spiel or what have you. It's a good way for them to get connected with the technical community in the area. So please talk to them about that. And again, we do survive on donations, so chip in when we go out for pizza. This is the steering committee to which I alluded. Guys, raise your hands. Barry, our chairman, Bill, our PR officer, and Jack, the webmaster, myself, and the vice chairman, and Michael, our treasurer, is out there waiting on pizza so he can pay for it. We have an anti-harassment policy in place. We want this to be a welcoming, inclusive community. We don't want anybody feeling ostracized or uncomfortable around here.
In fact, later tonight or tomorrow, there will be an email sent out Sunday the 22nd at 1 p.m. at Duke. We're going to have an open meeting where we're looking at that policy and the various things that go along with it that we've been using to try to be more inclusive, to talk about how that's been and how we can move forward to be even better in the future. So it'll be an in-person meeting and with an online component if you can't make it. So be on the lookout for that. It's 22nd.
Thank you, Jack. So for anyone who's unclear on the harassment policy, though, it is currently on the site under anti-harassment. You can also email steering@trilug.org, and we've got we have a phone as well, but I don't know the number off the top of my head. That's one of the things we're actually going to be discussing here in the meeting. And feel free to private message any of the steering committee members on IRC as well. All right. I don't see Jonathan here tonight, but we try to call out anyone who's kind of gone above and beyond to help maintain and support the infrastructure. And Jonathan Main Guy chipped in, has been chipping in to help us get backups set up on our login server, which is, I think everyone will agree, a very desirable thing. So in absentia, thank you, Jonathan, very much for your help. Community announcements. So Splat Space has moved. Has anybody been to the new, okay, we've got a couple, so there's, they moved from downtown Durham, just down the street from Look of it, to a new space. Do you guys want to say anything about it, or?
It's nice. It's really great.
Is it bigger than the old?
It's not too much bigger, but there are no columns in the middle of the rooms, and it's very clean. It doesn't smell.
All good things, yes.
I think it's going to be a great location.
Okay, great.
And a lot more parking.
What's that?
The last one must have smelled.
It was not
Yes.
as fresh as perhaps it could have been. So anyway, check out the new Splat Space. It's a hackerspace in Durham. A lot of fun, a lot of really cool hacky things that go on there. First day with the new looks. Carolina Con is coming up at the end of March. If you have not heard of it or been before, it is a security conference that's held here in Raleigh. It is put on by the local 2600 chapter, and it's pretty much a grassroots effort. One of the nice things about it is the entry fee is $20. It's about the cheapest thing cheapest conference you'll find. But the quality, at least from last time I went, was really quite good. I've heard it varies, but
Don't be expecting something very academic.
yes.
Some of our members have been disappointed when they got there and realized it wasn't a proper conference. It's more of a frat party.
Concert.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got a bit of a different atmosphere, that's for certain. However, there's a lot of
Great material.
yeah, there's some really good material there. It's worth checking out. And it also, as you can see on their site, they say this is the last one of the Carolina cons that we're used to, and the reason for that is that as of next time, they're combining it with B-sides. They have been doing Carolina Con and B-sides one day, or Carolina Con one day, B-sides the next. Next year, they're going to combine them in one 2-day event. So
Carolina Con has typically been Friday night to Sunday night. It's been the whole weekend.
maybe I got that mixed up with something else there.
No, they were gonna merge them this year.
Were they?
Well, they said they wanted to get a real big name speaker, I forget his name, Mickey. They wanted to get Micknick and Anita all in there.
Okay.
So they wanted to.
Maybe it was, no, wait, it was InfoSec Con and B-sides that was merging, I'm sorry.
Right.
That was the one, okay, my mistake. At any rate, well, for some reason they say this is the last one.
So the price is going up next year.
Oh, is it?
Is that it?
No, it's the B-sides that wanted to get Micknick, so they were gonna
Okay.
merge with somebody, and I wasn't sure.
I think
She says it's InfoSec Con.
Yeah, I was trying
We have no idea why Carolina Con is
Exactly,
the last of its
but
kind.
Carolina Con is cool and it's worth checking
The
out.
last time they called it the end of days.
So maybe it's just a
Maybe
theme,
it's just their Armageddon
It's always-
theme they always do.
because it's always the last one. All right, so we have started doing this regularly. We're trying to get this going as a regular thing. The week following this meeting, next Thursday on the 19th, we will have a server hack night / project night down the street at WebAssign. The theme this time is backups. We really want to get those set up and running on Pilot. We may have some external dependencies on that, I'm not sure, but at any rate, even if that's not your interest or specialty, come on down, share your knowledge, hack on a personal project, help others do the same, get together. It's less of a presentation, more participatory workshop. There will be an announcement going out about this probably tomorrow with directions, maps, details, all that good stuff. All right, have a job, need a job. Does anybody here know of openings at their company or elsewhere would like to bring it up to the member?
Hey folks, what's up? As you know, I'm Barry, chair of the I recently got a new job with a group called Cumulus Networks. They are a startup based, they're based in California, but they have a full office in Cary, North Carolina as well. They do basically a version of Linux that runs on network switches. There are some openings, including one in my team in varsity, which is looking for automation folks. So, Puppet, Chef, Ansible, Ruby, Python, will be of interest to our group. So feel free to let me know if you're interested.
Hi, I'm Bill Farrow. I work for a smart meter company called Census. We do gas, electricity, and water. My team is always on the lookout for embedded Linux engineers, and I know there's always security engineers needed, network security, operations security, that sort of stuff. So if you want a job at Census, look it up online, and if you want me to help you get in the queue, tell me, and then I get a bonus if you get employed. So.
Are there any internships on web dev in any
They do have internships, yes.
We're also looking for interns.
Okay.
Anybody else have a job? All right. Anybody need a job? Looking right now. Everybody happy with their current one?
I'm looking for internship.
Looking for an internship? Okay. Want to stand up and say what you're
Guys.
looking for specifically? Or?
Yeah, I'm looking for a web dev internship or a software engineering. So, like I have an experience of working on both the back end and the front end, around 1 year professional experience, and aim is to like become a full stack developer. So I'm looking in internship regarding that.
What was your name?
Utsav. Utsav.
Utsav?
Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yep.
My name is Aaron Schraub. I'm a software developer. Mainly been working in Ruby and Perl, so done JavaScript, C, shell scripting, number of other languages. Also done some system administration in the past. My current contract is ending at the end of the month, so I'm looking for something to do after that.
All right. Thank you much. Anyone else looking? All right. All right, so tonight we're having what we're calling an unmeeting, and it is a grand experiment. We came up with the concept that we're going to try it out and see how it goes. We need your participation in this, so I have sign-up sheets. I'll be out there in the lobby while we're having pizza. If you are interested in a topic, just put a mark whether you know about it or want to know about it or both. If you know about it and would like to share, put your name down for the panel. Come on up here and share what you know with the group. There's also a slot for a driver. Most of the topics have one at this point, but there's a couple of them that are left driverless. And that'll be whoever wants to put their hands on the keyboard to drive the topic's discussion. And then at the end of the pizza, we'll total up the votes. And I think at this point we've only got enough topics to pretty much fill the meeting. So it was going to be an elimination thing. I don't think we're going to end up with that. So, but let's see how it goes. We've got 4 different topics right now. We can use those and segue into others. So that is kind of the concept of it. Any questions on how this is going to work before we do that? Clear? All right, great. Next.
Hey, we can do our members leave the room.
I can see about turning this thing on.
Don't worry.
No, it is not working.
No, not worth it.
All right. So I'm happy to see that we've got at least a couple people on every topic. That's awesome. From a popularity standpoint, it looks like the GitHub flow is our top pick. So why don't we start off with that? Do you have something to plug in and show, or just?
Not really, just kind of top.
All right. So Barry, Jack, Gustav, and Rohit, I believe. Come on up.
All right, well, I'll go ahead and get started introducing myself. So my name's Barry, once again, I came up here and said something more than once today. I figured that I was interested in talking a little bit about sort of the GitHub flow and how I've been using it. So I fell in love with GitHub when I first joined it, gosh, about 2 or 3 years ago. What?
Sorry, we're still showing pizza.
Oh, yeah, let's not do that anymore.
That's one solution.
Anyway.
Anymore?
So what I want to do, sort of, some more background. I've used it both for my personal projects and development. I've used it in open source, and I've used it just recently in my company. So I have learned a lot about using it as a collaboration tool, working with other people, and avoiding all those wonderful merge conflicts that happen whenever you get your students, for example, to use it for the first time. So I figured that I'd come up here and entertain questions or give some explanation about how I found it very helpful. If anyone wants to hear about the technical flow to it, sort of the social flow to it, and what I've found success with, or any other questions that you might find interesting. And Jack also wanted to mention something.
Yeah, well, I also work with Git, but I was going to add some stuff after you're done also.
Sure. Okay, well, so are there any questions at all?
What exactly is flow?
What exactly is flow? So the GitHub flow, with scare quotes, is a term that GitHub itself uses for what they consider to be the way that Git should be used on their platform. All right. So Git was, I believe, originally created by Linus Torvalds as the official version control system for the Linux kernel, and then he open sourced it, and then shared it with the world. And now, through the power of the internet, it has managed to beat out a lot of other tools, which are equal in essential usage with various differences in usability depending on your particular slant, such as Mercurial, Bazaar, so on and so forth. History aside, GitHub has certainly shown itself as being a particularly powerful platform for what they call social coding. So you have a bunch of people who share projects and work together by means of sort of a sense of being able to do things on your own, and then instead of having to ask permission to do things, you just show people what you've done, and then ask them, hey, here I've already done this, I'd like to incorporate it into your major project. So the GitHub flow refers essentially to how you help out another project. Let's say there's a project that exists on GitHub, some popular open source some web browser, right? And you as a user of it want to provide some sort of feature, all right? In a centralized version control system, you would have to ask for permission, or you have to just email an ugly patch to them on the mailing list. In which case, they would have to take your patch, they have to manually figure out sort of where it fits in their tree structure. Whereas on GitHub, what you do is you make a complete copy of the entire repository, okay, a fork. You fork the repository, and then you can make your changes and incorporate them directly into their history. So whenever you share that with the developers, they see exactly where your contribution fits in. It's much easier for them to integrate into the project. You do this by doing what's called a pull request. Right? The pull request is you request that they pull this change from your tree into theirs. Instead of you getting any sort of write access to their system, they are able to, you become essentially a first-class contributor without having to have, authoritative write access to their server. Okay? And what makes the GitHub flow with capital letters so special is the fact that their web interface is completely designed around it. If you visit a file and want to change it, you can start editing it right there. If you say save the change, it will actually fork the project, make its own branch, and create a pull request. That way, you don't even have to think about trees, merging strategies, or what have you. You simply start doing it naturally, and then the web interface takes care of that for you. The GitHub flow is something that's particularly special to GitHub and other like repository collaboration consolidation hubs like GitLab. It's built on top of the actual Git protocol. It's not part of the Git protocol. Go for it.
How does Git handle it if, like, for example, two individuals submit a pull request for the same section of code, like the same few lines.
Yeah. So of course that never works out. What ends up happening is the first one wins. While Git is really smart about trying to avoid collisions as much as possible, what you'll end up having happen is they will merge, the project will pick one to merge, and then when they find the other one, they're gonna have to manually pull it and then figure out where to resolve the conflict. But for any level of running a project, you have to be sure that you're not just pulling things willy-nilly. You actually you have a policy for doing a review of that program, and if it involves a conflict, you have some people, not gatekeepers, but more like custodians who are able to sort of clean that up.
Right. The other model I've seen is, right, whichever one you merge first, right, the project custodian may clean it up, or you may kick it back to the original contributor and say, hey, make sure this merges cleanly against the new latest that you're trying to write against. And Git has various tools depending on whether you care about neat history or don't care about neat history, for essentially replaying your changes on top of the newest one.
Something I find really cool about that is just like the way that the website handles that sort of thing. The first time I contributed to an open source game that was very obsessive about proper GitHub flow pull request merging was that what they do is, the cool thing about the pull request is that it begins a conversation. So every time you push to the branch associated with that request, it adds it to a line where people can see how it's evolved and do code review without you having to make a second request. You simply, you submit your pull request, and then you might get some comments back from the custodians telling you how to fix it. You just have to push it back up to your branch, and once it meets their requirements, such as passing their continuous integration, or once it meets their code style guidelines, what have you, then they will finally merge it, close that, and then you can work on a new one. That's my other hands.
So we know that GitHub is used to manage source code repositories. What's the wildest thing that you've seen managed by GitHub?
Ooh, that's cool. So the wild thing I've seen, I've done some weird stuff with my GitHub repository. I was one of the folks who helped a journal publish their book on GitHub. So what they wanted to do was actually publish their book as a GitHub repository so people could fork it, edit it whatsoever. That was pretty cool. Not particularly wild, but still pretty neat. Other things is GitHub occasionally adds new features for ways to visualize files and repositories. So for example, while originally they were just there for hosting source code, you can actually provide like a map form, like a JSON map format. And if you provide that format, it'll actually visualize the map with the data highlighted on it. If you provide like an AutoCAD image, it'll actually visualize it in a 3D OpenGL thing or something. So they actually provide support to encourage very interesting submissions.
There's also another application right on top of Git, Git Annex, which tracks file metadata in Git, but not the files themselves. So you might use this if you have large files, but you can use it as sort of how you might use an archiving system. Which building do I have these books in? Which computer are these files on? So I can store the files in some sort of object store, and then track the metadata in Git, and wherever I have that Git repository, the machine will know, hey, do I have the file locally, or do I have to go get it? Which is pretty cool. Mm-hmm. And shows I think one of the things that set Git apart from the other similar distributed version control systems is that it's a thin layer over a generic object store.
How or have you ever dealt with large pieces of, for instance, XML that were really machine generated? They weren't intended to be edited by hand, and then you'd have to deal with conflicts.
Yeah. So obviously, Git is designed for files that are edited by hand. The nice thing about XML files is even that they're text, so they still work better than, for example, large images. What I usually do to deal with that is I will put machine-generated files in my git ignore. So every Git repository has a .git ignore file where you can provide a format of files to never add to the repository. So what you can do is you could just, in that directory, if there was a machine-generated thing, or if you know the file name structure for it, you put that in there, and those will never get pushed to GitHub at all. or to any Git repository at all. And then you can generate them on the fly when you need to.
So you have to have something else that's collaboration friendly to generate the XML.
Barry's assuming that these are not your source. This is some sort of object or generated.
This is more like output, right?
Well,
If it's your source, then you need to track it.
Yeah.
And so you just need some sort of smart XML merging tool and not.
And Git supports using external tools for merging.
Yeah, so
If right, this is sort of like in a textbook where it says, the proof for this theorem is left as an exercise to the reader. Right. If you have an XML merging tool, we suppose, you can plug that into Git. Right.
there's these things called commit hooks, which are programs that are run at different points during the commit cycle. So for example, you can do pre and post commit hooks, such as when you commit, before your commit is done by GitHub, it will call whatever programs you need to, so it can do any sort of other fancy conflict resolution that's necessary for your project.
Like maybe you need to beautify it, make your XML some sort of standard indentation or something like that before you commit, to make sure everything that gets pushed into your repository meets a certain coding standard or something.
well, even if it's HTML, if somebody's editing the same section of HTML that you are.
Yeah, but that's
Well, so most of the Git merging stuff ignores white space already, which helps.
It's very smart. So also once again.
But yeah, conflicts are
inevitable.
conflicts. You
But
gotta
the way that
handle
GitHub
most of
prefers you deal with conflict is to ensure that any work you do within your own personal branch. So the idea behind GitHub Flow is that all of your work is, you never edit the same branch with somebody else at the same time. You work on your own branch, and then that way conflicts only happen during the merge process when people are ready for them. We're getting a time.
Maybe one more question.
All right, one more question.
Okay.
Really,
Oh, you're gonna love this one. So I have a project in my Linux home computer. What are the steps to get onto GitHub?
what are the steps to get your personal project onto GitHub? They're luckily very easy. The first thing you do is you can do it one of these ways, either not in order. On your local machine, you initialize the Git repository. Install Git via sudo or yum, or not sudo, apt-get or yum if you don't have it already. And in the top level of your folder, type git init. That turns your folder into a Git repository. You can then add everything recursively into your Git repository, and then
That's done.
That's done.
What's next?
On GitHub, create your repository on the website. Okay, give it a name, and then what you'll do is you add what's called a remote. A remote is a Git repository.
These instructions are on that page when you create.
Yeah, so
the
not
next step is right there.
You can just copy paste. But what you're doing is, the cool thing about the decentralization is this thing called remotes. On your local repository, you give a remote a name. In general convention, origin, the word, refer to the Git repository on GitHub. So when you say push my project to GitHub, you say push origin branch name. That takes your project on the local machine and brings it into alignment with some remote repository. And once again, the steps are actually on GitHub once you create your new empty repository.
How much does it cost? Or if you want to make it private and all that stuff?
If you want to be private, students can get a free micro account. The private plan for 5 private repos starts at $7 a month, and then it increases at a certain nonlinear rate.
But you can also use Bitbucket for free private repositories and GitHub for free public ones.
There's also an open source clone of GitHub called GitLab, and their hosted instance
Okay,
provides.
great. Now time for the icing. There are many there are many free software implementations of collaborative code platforms. Gitorious is one of them. We use it at Duke. It doesn't have an issue tracker. So if you need an issue tracker, maybe not Gitorious, use an external one like Redmine. Polythia is my favorite. It supports both Git and Mercurial. Yes.
What are these again?
These are free software collaborative coding platforms.
Replacements for
In
GitHub.
the cloud, not local. They're like.
Put it on your own box.
Right.
Put it on
Well,
your own,
well,
but-
either or find someone else who's hosting it. There's a Gitorious hosting company also.
Put it on VPS.
This would be a good thing for your company to host in your department for all your people, all your developers to work on their code together.
Right, but my favorite is Clithia, but we'll go through the other ones. Fabricator is from Facebook. GitLab, which Barry mentioned. Also,
Better than GitHub.
Yes,
So-
right. I wanted to talk about Darks, which also has a collaborative posting platform. Yes.
Wait, what's wrong with, why did you skip over GitLab? She said it's even better than GitHub.
Because the hook is gonna come out with a hook and link me off the stage.
You're gonna do, oh.
I don't know. And while I know about this, I know the most about Calyptia because
Okay.
it looked most attractive to me. But I want to talk about Darks because it has a different mental model. If you're going to be working with Git, internalizing this mental model of what the fundamental object is and how the repository is structured is important. So in Git, the fundamental object is a tree. And so you have each version of your code is a tree, and you have a next one, and then the Git tools can compare trees in various interesting ways for looking at diffs. And Mercurial has the same mental model. Dark has a different mental model, and that is the fundamental object is the patch. And so there's ends of the spectrum, but I see a lot of people who are obsessing about not merging too much in Git because it makes the history weird because of the way the graphs work. If you're really thinking that way, I think you really are thinking you want Darks and may not know it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Beth. So, as I said, this is our first one of these, so I figure if we get to the end and we have some time left, we can bring up more questions and see how this goes. All right, let's say looks like the next most popular one is the Vim plugins. That's me. We've also got Aaron, Gustav, and Rohit. Were any of you thinking of being on the panel, or and I'm going to? Aaron? Excellent. You guys wanted to learn? Yeah. Fair enough. All right. Actually, this is the right one.
Hey Jack, which IRC client should I use if I want to use IRC? IRC. So I want to use it, so which client should I use or how should I use it?
Try a bunch of them, find the one you like.
I use a mic.
Which one?
All right. So, first of all, show of hands, Vim users. I suspect I have one up here. All right, vast majority. Another show of hands. Who has a set of Vim plugins that they use on a semi-regular basis? I see a lot of. I'm not so sure. All right. So, for those of you who don't use Vim plugins, is the reason for that management of the plugins, like figuring out how to get them installed and whatnot. I'm seeing thumbs up and nods. All right. So I'm going to show you how the plugin that I use to manage my plugins and a couple of the plugins that I use on a regular basis. That makes it pretty dead simple. All right. So I've got a Vagrant VM going. I promise. Hey, see, told you. All right. As you can see, there's no .dem anything in there. All right.
Is it on GitHub?
What's that?
Is it on GitHub?
This is on GitHub. I will. I'll share the link after the session. All right. So there's a script in here that I wrote called initialize. Most of this is just boilerplate to protect make sure that it's a clean run. Most of what we need to do to get this set up is clone this Git repo. Yes, it is on GitHub. It's called Bundle, and it's a Vim plugin bundle manager. And then after that, you run Vim with plugin install minus Q all. You're gonna see what that looks like. So it clones it, copies in a vimrc that just has a couple of lines in it that I'll show you in just a minute. Hey, at least I spun up the VM first. So one of the things that kind of has gotten in the way of using plugins, at least for me, was manually finding them, putting them in the right place in my .vim directory, keeping them up to date, etc. And then, so this is where Bundle is going through and installing itself. These are the plugins I was talking about. Each one of them is being pulled down and installed. They're relatively small, so it shouldn't take too long. And then I found the first plugin manager that I used, which was called Pathogen, which was written by Tim Pope, who has written a boatload of Git plugins, or Vim plugins, by the way. Does some really good stuff. And it was nice, but what you had to do was set up the plugins that you wanted as submodules of this particular module, and then you update them and blah, blah, blah. What I like about Bundle is that I don't have to think about it. And as for updating, it's all can be done from within a Vim window. So I'm going to show you an example of installing a new plugin just on the fly from the editor itself. Once it's actually finished installing the first ones I put in. And then, but I'll also show you some of the plugins that I use on a regular basis. All right, last one. Those commands right there, the plugin, this, that, and the others, are essentially what you put in your vimrc. That's almost exactly, or actually, that is the exact syntax that you use to include or to install a Vim plugin, and which is really, really nice. That pulls it down from Git. And when you do :plugin install, it'll install anything that's in there. Plugin update will update whatever you have installed.
So the reason why we're waiting is because it's
Git
fetching
cloning.
them remotely.
It's Git cloning. Yep.
Wait,
All right.
what's that
So
mean?
we're done.
What does that mean? You're Git cloning? Or?
What's that? No, that means they're installed, which means that I now have my environment. So for example, I've got something called Nerd Tree, which there is a built-in plugin which is very similar to this, built into Vim. I think it's
NetRW.
NetRW. Thank you. Which is it's good, but it doesn't. It's missing some of the nice, I would say, seamlessness of Nerd Tree. So you'll find various flame wars and holy wars on NetRW versus Nerd Tree. Don't install this. Don't install this. I prefer Nerd Tree. You know, pick your poison. Do you have a preference?
I mainly use Nerd Tree, so
Okay.
Slightly forked version, in fact.
Okay. Respect. So Nerd Tree gives you this nice edit, or this nice format, and if I just hit return on that, it opens it up in the window. And so now I'm over here in the README. If I go back over here, I can just open up something else. I'm maneuvering around via the standard window control W, J, JK, HJKL.
Is there a way to resize that in Nerd Tree, or?
There is part of the problem is that I'm projecting, trying to make it visible, so it's you can resize it the same way you resize anything. Control W, arrow keys will move things around. You hit question mark, you get help. So, for example, I can open two windows. I can open one under the other one from within Nerd Tree. All right. Another one so if I do list plugins, it tells me which ones I have. So now if I do like, one of the ones that I've got is Tutorius. No, that's not it. Fugitive, thank you. Fugitive, also by Tim Pope. And it doesn't seem to be, remember the status?
Is there tab completion?
What's that?
Is there tab completion in the commands?
Yeah.
That's not right.
GST.
There we go. All right. GST, thank you. Wasn't the syntax I was using earlier, but basically it opens this up in within your editor, so I don't have to break out, and I can even add that to the to what I want to commit by just hitting minus and take it out again. I can also do a git commit from within Vim, so I don't actually have to break out of the editor to manage it.
Yeah,
Fugitive
it's really
is a
nice.
Git plugin.
Fugitive is a Git plugin, and it's a Git interface within Linux.
And it also has the gdiff command for editing a file that's managed by Git. By default, it will do a diff between what's in the work tree and what's in the index. And you can use the normal vim diff commands to stage portions of the commit, or portions of your changes, or undo the portions of the changes. And you can do a diff against older versions, pull in those. It's really nice for times I'll be doing one change and see something else that I want to fix right now in the same file. So just go ahead and do that, then bring up gdiff. Say, okay, just that little bit that I changed, add that to the index and commit it. So I have a nice focused commit on the small thing that I found without pulling in all of the other things that I was working on, which probably aren't related.
Nice, yeah. So it's like one of the things that prevents you in a normal case from doing that sort of thing is, break out of the editor, commit, go back in. I mean, it's a bit laborious. Whereas this is just kind of seamless as part of your regular editing flow.
Is there a way to rename the commands or alias them?
Yeah, you can rename. That's just standard Vim. Like you can alias one thing to another within Vim. So another. So let's nerd tree and screw and fugitive. Let me show you. I downloaded this specifically. There's another plugin called Vim Dispatch. Bear with me for a second.
Someone should do a thing on Tmux.
You're right.
We're still using screens.
All right, so I'm in a Tmux session right here.
That's the only thing I use, but it's supposed to be better.
Yes, I'm in the README for this project, and I've edited around whatever I've done. Right?
Always willing to learn something.
If I do make, this is part of it. This comes out of the Vim Dispatch plugin. It opens up another Tmux pane below mine, and it runs the make in it while I'm still editing the file up here.
Was that because you put in the capital M?
Yes, it's the make is capital M make is provided by the Vim Dispatch plugin. Yeah.
What's better about opening a Tmux pane rather than a Vim window?
Because you can run a shell in a Tmux pane that you cannot in a Vim pane.
So you can't?
No, unfortunately, there's a Vim shell plugin. There's been several actually, but they've all basically been abandoned.
Oh, does it redraw the whole VTY window?
Yeah, well, they're
right, because you can drop to a shell in Vim.
Yes, you can drop to a shell in Vim. Yes, but like I can't split it and then drop to a shell in this one and keep this one open in I have to. So
screen is useful.
Can you just repeat
Yeah, I know.
at a
Yes.
high level what you did? You kicked off
Alright.
the TMUX window using what plugin?
No. So TMUX, I started TMUX, and that's what I was doing in my development. I'm typing, I'm doing whatever, in the source files. When I decide that I want to try a build, but I don't want to jump out of the editor, if I'm within a TMUX session, there's actually several options that come with this plugin. I do :M make, and then it opens up another TMUX session underneath, another TMUX pane underneath mine, and runs the make while I'm still editing in the other pane.
That's the name of the plugin was.
Vim dispatch, Vim-dispatch, so I can,
That's the advantage over the regular Vim.
you take a look up there. So those are the plugins that I have installed. First one, of course, is Bundle. Bundle itself is a plugin. Vim Fugitive was the Git one. Vim Dispatch is the one that I just demonstrated, and then Nerdtree was that first one. So those are the plugins that I have.
And that's the advantage, is that it opens a whole nother window while you can still edit.
Right, and if you look over down at the bottom, it actually has the output of the make. All right, I'm not a TMUX guru, so I don't know all the keys. At any rate, so you actually have the warnings and errors off of your make in a separate window that you can reference while you're editing. Did you have another?
Yeah, I actually use a whole lot of plugins. I just did a count on my Vim bundle directory. I currently have 57 plugins installed. Now, a lot of those are actually just syntax highlighting for different file types, but I have a fair number that I use that are more intense. Actually, I'm still just using Pathogen for managing them. I like something a bit lower level than the bundle, especially since I generally try to keep my Vim configuration portable across a large number of machines, different Vim versions. I have a fair number of conditionals, check for different things before enabling certain plugins. Some of them aren't real polite, or can be kind of annoying if you don't have features that they require. But every time you start Vim, complain, oh, you don't have Python support, can't use this plugin. It's like, yes, I know. It's not that important to me. To few plugins that I really like. Gitfeed, it's actually somewhat based on Fugitive. If you're familiar with the git-k command, it's a graphical program for browsing history. Gitfeed is a plugin for doing a lot of the same things from right within Vim. So it can show you the history, browse through that. I use that a lot for doing code review things.
What's that called?
People have changed. It also allows you to do merges from there very easily.
You said that was called Gitv?
Yes. There's also Altisnips, Snippet Manager. It's like having abbreviations, although a bit more powerful. Abbreviations for doing programming. Type if and tab or whatever key is configured to expand it. You put parentheses and braces, and then you can jump between the different points in there. Makes it very easy to add new ones. Let's see. So we've been using a fairly new one called You Complete Me recently. It's an enhancement to built-in Vim's Omni-Complete feature. It'll actually watch right as you're in insert mode, typing along, and basically make suggestions of things that you might be starting to type, and just expand on that. And really help it speed up when you need to type in some long string repeatedly.
While you're looking over that, there's a site called vimawesome.com, which has a searchable index of Vim plugins. And one of the nice things I like about it is it has different ways, like some of the common ways to install the plugins, for example, so that you know what to add to your VimRC to get the plugins up and running with your in your editor.
So Brian.
Yes.
So that means, so a plugin doesn't have to, nothing has to happen in the plugin so it's ready to work with bundle.
Right. Yes. So.
So any plugin would work with it.
I'm not going to. So I'll say that bundle will manage most of them. I don't know if there's a minimum set of things that it has to have before bundle will work with it, but most of them will work with bundle. Yes.
And for the most part, most of the plugin managers work just by adding directories to the path that Vim will look to for files to load. So as long as the plugin uses the appropriate directory structure, it should work with basically any of the plugin managers. And they basically have to adhere to that directory structure unless they have some fairly complicated installation procedure, which they generally try to avoid. Most of the time, even before plugin managers, it was basically download this tarball and unpack it under your .vim directory. So anyone that's set up for that should work with basically any plugin manager.
We're going to need to switch topics again. Any other questions? Jack, do you have one?
Oh, have either of you written Vim plugins or hacked on them?
No, I have not.
I've done a fair amount of hacking on the Vim plugins. Like when I was pushing at Nerdtree, I said that I use a hacked version of that. I haven't yet gotten around to cleaning up my changes to a form that's really suitable for submissions. Really only for local use. The Giphy plugin that I mentioned, I've done a number of contributions for that. I've also contributed to the Ultisnips plugin that I mentioned, and I think a few others that I'm not thinking of now.
This isn't really a question, but a statement. If anybody is interested in learning more about how to use Vim and how to kind of get from beginner level to total Vim Ninja, there's a local company called the Pragmatic Programmer. They're a publishing house, and they have a book called Practical Vim. I can never remember that title, but the subtitle is called Edit Text at the Speed of Thought. And it's a very awesome book. It'll just build you right on up.
So that's Practical Vim from
the Pragmatic Programmer.
From the Pragmatic Programmer. Okay, thank you. Any other?
Are you gonna link your VimRCs in the?
Yes, we can link the VimRC and my GitHub repo will be linked in it anyway, and all my dot files are in there anyway. So.
And my dot files are all in the GitHub account as well.
All right. All right, cool. Thank you very much. Thanks. All right, so actually up next, it depends on which one we go with, you may be staying. So we've got Myth TV and Linux file system permissions and concepts. We got 2 hash marks on the permissions, so I think we'll go with that one first. All right. So Jack, that's Stephen, myself, and you're staying. Let's see if I can find where I put that window. There it is. All right, so Linux permissions that togetherness. Are we good, Bill?
Wider angle lens.
Oh, wow. All right, so Linux permissions can cause people a little bit of confusion, and so we're kind of going to want to do a little bit of a breakdown of how they work, what they mean, how to set them, etc. If we run out of things to say, we can also go into things a little more extensively. So to get started, permissions are the basic file system ACLs, essentially on a Unix system. They're broken up into 3 triplets of bits. The first one applies to the user, the owner of the file. The middle 3 apply to the group that the file is owned by. And the last 3 is for everybody else in the world.
In a normal file system, there's only one group on a file.
Good point. So yeah.
Now
Normal
there are fackles.
Right.
But that's another issue.
Right. Exactly. So we're doing basic permissions first. We might get into the extensive things later. All right. So if you look at each of those triplets, you can think of them as a bit. Each one of them bits is well, that's kind of what they are. So if it's set, it's a 1. If it's not set, it's a 0. So R dash dash is the first one is 2 to the second one is 2 to the first, third one is 2 to the 0th, 4, 2, and 1. So down below you see how it's broken down. So 0, 0, 0 up through 7, 7, 7, and that is what determines which of those bits is set. So let's take that and apply it to what we were talking about. So if the user's permissions are read-write, and that's 110 or 6, group is read 1004, everyone else is read 100 also 4, so RWRR is 644. So far so good? All right, so this is what all of the different possible permission combos look like, just using the user's permissions here. But for 0, 0, 0, obviously it's straight blanks across the board. 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 7. So some of those are a little oddball, and you're almost never going to see them. But that is all the possible combinations. Of course, each of them applies to each of the slots. So user, group, or everyone else. Feel free to raise your hands with questions, by the way, as we're going through this. All right. So you can also set them symbolically. So you can do chmod with the numeric one, or you can apply them using the symbols. So it's U, G, or O, which is user, group, or other, or A, which is all of them. And then R, W, or X, and we'll get into T and S and all that in a minute. But for right now, R, W, or X. So what you see here is, A equals, well, nothing. That is 0, 0, 0. If user is execute, group other is nothing, then that's just the execute. On down the line till the bottom of it is user is RWX, and group and other is nothing. So yeah.
In this syntax, can you space out group and other as well?
Yeah, you can do G equals, comma, O equals if you like. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, because you have G and O grouped together.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you're right. So I have group and other grouped together here. They'll be split out in an example a little bit further on. I'm doing it right here just because I wanted to demonstrate just the permissions on the user, all the different combinations. All right, so here are some of the more common directory permissions that you run into. So the first one is 700, which is read, write, execute for the user. The execute bit. Go ahead. Want to cover that?
Okay. So the execute bit for a directory means something different than it does for a file, because you're not going to run a directory. It means you're able to list the contents of the directory, see what files
Search
are in
the
it.
content.
Search.
You can't, R gives you list, but X gives you search. With R, it will allow you to see the contents, the file names of the directory. If R is missing, it will not let you do that. However, if you do have X and you already know the name of the file in there, then it will let you look for that file.
Let you get that file out, but you still can't list it. You can't do ls file name. You have to just cat file name if you know it's there. Yep.
And of course, you can use X as a way of allowing yourself to navigate deeper in the tree.
Meaning?
If you've got X's only at one level, you can pass through that level.
so a bit of a security through obscurity, but yeah, you can use that to only go where you know how to get to, that kind of thing. So yeah, so 755 is full control for the user, and the only thing anybody else would be able to do is list and read the contents of it. All right. And then common permissions for files, you'll commonly see 600, 644, 666 for something that everybody's writing to. Executable by the user, executable by the world. So for a file, the execute bit is execute, and it determines who is able to execute it.
Although you can't count on taking execute permission away on actually preventing people from executing things. There are ways around that. So.
Yeah, you can also, I mean, if you've got read permission, you can, if nothing else, make a copy of it and chmod it to whatever you want. And so these are the symbolic versions of all of those chmods. Just say exactly the same as the last slide. Questions? All right. Oh, hey, stop right there. Cool. So the other bits that I was alluding to is set UID, set GID, and sticky bit. So the set UID bit on a directory, there are some operating systems in which that means if you set UID on a directory, any file that's created in that directory will be owned by the same user that owns the directory. That does not exist on Linux. That doesn't do that on Linux, and I don't know of one off the top of my head that does, but it does exist on some. In most cases, it's in the file. On files, the set UID for executable means that anybody who whenever that file is executed, it runs as the user, the owner of the file. So if there's a set UID program that is owned by root, if that file is executed, it will be running with root privileges. Scripts will not run, are not allowed to run with set UID. It doesn't take effect. Set GID, that does have the effect on a directory of any file that is created from within that directory will be owned by the same group that owns the directory. So if the directory is owned by group foo, then if I touch a file under that directory, it will be owned by group foo, whether or not I'm a member of that group. And that bit is inherited by subdirectories under it. So if I create a directory under that, it will also have the set GID bit, and so the entire hierarchy will be carried through as group foo.
If you create a file, it starts out owned by your primary group when that bit is absent. And what is your primary group? Well, you go ID minus A, it'll give you your UID and all the groups that you belong to. The very first group is your primary group. You can change your primary group with the new group command.
And new GRP, isn't it?
New GRP, yes.
Which essentially logs you into a new group.
Yeah, it starts a new shell with the other group as your primary group.
Right, so you might want to use that if you don't want to use some form of extended permissions, and you have a shared project you create a local group for, and giving people read write or something, and
right, I mean,
they want to enforce the files.
Yeah, you can actually do like a group ownership, like group project type work. It can come in handy if you do group owner and group writable plus set GID on the directories. You end up with basically a group writable project.
And let's note that the order in which the permissions apply are if your UID matches the owner UID, then that's the permission that applies. If your group, all three of them, it ignores all the rest. So if the owner is missing read, but somebody else has got read, you still don't have read if you're the owner. Same with the group. If you are not the owner, then the group applies, and the others' bits don't apply, nor the user bits. And finally, if neither of those two, then the other bits apply.
Good clarification, thank you. And set GID on an executable has a similar analogous role as a set UID bit on an executable, with the same constraint that a shell or a script will not be allowed to run set GID. The sticky bit is is almost exclusively now used on directories, and it has very little effect anywhere else on most operating systems. And what it means is when I set that on a directory, like you'll see this on /temp very commonly. So temp will have, their permissions will be RWX, RWX, RWT. And that T is the sticky bit. And that sticky bit on a directory that's otherwise 777, well, actually any directory, doesn't matter. It means that no file, you cannot rename or delete any file in that directory unless you are the owner of it or the super user. So anything, so that's why temp is, you can write temp files in there without having to worry about somebody else coming around and removing it or renaming it. Because only the owner can actually do that.
Yeah. Whereas if that bit isn't set on the directory, anyone that can write to the directory can remove any file from it.
Or rename.
Or rename, yes. And the reason for that is that a file on the file system is an entry in the directory. So everything in Unix is a file, and the directory is just a special kind of file, and within that, it has a list of directory entries. If you've got write permission on that directory file, then you can modify the table of entries that it knows about, which points to the files that are within it. So you touch /temp/foo, then that means you've placed an entry in the /temp special file that says foo, this is foo, and it points to an inode and yada, yada, yada. And so if that directory is writable by anybody, then anybody can go in and rename it, which is an operation on the directory, or unlink it, which is also an operation on the directory. And the sticky bit does that in ancient times, the sticky bit was also something that could be applied to an executable, which told the kernel to keep the executable image in memory after it stopped executing, presumably for a restart. There are almost no operating systems left where that is actually the case anymore. So it's on a file that pretty much is in the log. You can set it, but it doesn't do anything. Questions so far? And we're going to get to setting them here in a second. I have not talked about UMask, and no, we have not. Would you like to go over that now, or do you want to?
It seems like a good place for it. Okay. Right here.
You're up, Jack.
So, I think we're going to talk about setting these in a second, but so I created a file. What mode is it? And so there's something called a UMask, which essentially, if you think of the default mode being 777, and if I have a UMask of 22, if I essentially mask out those bits from the mode, that's what by default when I create a file, we'll get that. So if my UMask is set to 22, it'll mask out the 2 bits in the group and the other.
The logical operation is
Right.
it's effectively a NAND.
Smiley face.
Smiley face. Smiley face operator is very important.
Right.
So, yeah, the operation is effectively a NAND. You take the
So basically, he's saying that if you create a directory, actually, the default is 722. If your UMask is 22, it masks out the right bit, which is the second bit in, on group and other, and it results in 755. So a make here will give you 755 directory. That's your UMask.
Right. So on Pilot, for instance, because there's so many other people on the system, I have my mask set to 077, so that then I'm the only one that has access to the files.
He has to explicitly invite you in, basically.
Right, and so I've done this in my shell startup routine. I call UMask, and then the mask I want, and call it UMask without an argument, without your current UMask.
And the construction of a UMask is exactly the same as the construction we went through for the permissions. It's the 3 sets of 3 bits, and whichever ones you want to mask out, that's what you want your UMask to be.
now that 777, the default is declared by whatever executable is actually creating the file. This is system open call. or create call, well, has as one of its arguments what the default permissions are, and then that gets applied to the UMask, and then that's the final permissions.
Question? Oh.
Just add, for people who write software, many security holes have come about by people writing software and taking for granted that there will be a sensible UMask in place. You have to think about that explicitly if you write files with your software.
And to point out that the UMask is largely the reason that most, I believe, Linux distributions these days will create a private directory or private group for each user that makes it relatively safe to set the UMask to 007, because then your default group is a group that only you're a member of. So if by default you would allow your group to have permissions, you're not really opening things up. But then, especially set GID directory, you can have a group for project, set GID group on that directory for the project, and your UMask won't get in the way of creating files that can be accessed by people working on the same project.
All right, so how do we set the special bit? All right, any questions on the UMask before? All right, how do we set these special bits? All right, if you think of each of the triplets of bits as a single bit, so the set UID would correspond to the user, set GID to group, set and sticky bit to other. Take that, extend it so that the first column is user, first bit is user, second bit group, third bit is other, or sticky. And so you construct the special ones by putting those together. So if you do 1, it's just the sticky bit. If you do 2, it's just set GID. 0 and 1 is set GID plus sticky, etc. and so on. And what does that look like? I said, what does that look like? There we go. So you set them by appending it to the other permissions that you're setting. So it's going to be the 4th mode setting that you put in. So 1777 is the typical permissions on /temp, for example. So that's what you're going to see: RWX, RWX, RWT, and that is what the sticky bit looks like, and that's how you set it. If I want to do set UID on an executable, for example, that would be like 4775 or 4755 right there. So you see the S in the execute spot on the user. That means that the set UID bit is set. Incidentally, if the set UID bit is set and the execute bit is not set, that'll be a capital S. Not that I don't think there's any effect of doing that. Like it doesn't do, you can't execute it, so it's not, might as well not be set. Set GID, and then the last one, for example, is set GID and sticky on a directory. So you have the group ownership cascading along with the sticky bit protections. And you can also set these symbolically. So you set sticky bit with T. You set the set GID and set UID are the same. It's S, and it just depends on which one you're applying it to. If it's applied to U, then S is set UID. If it's applied to G, it's set GID. And here's where it's broken out in group and other, as you were asking earlier. So like the third example there is RWX group, RWXS, and other RX. So you can break it out individually.
Question. And generally, no.
Yeah, well, so I've always used the plus for like last 20 years. What's the equals? Is that the new thing, or?
You can do plus, equals, or minus. So with symbolic chmoding, you can either add, subtract, or set equal to whatever mode you want to. So yes, good point. And I don't think I've got an example of that in here, but you can, yes, down there at the bottom. So at the very bottom, when you've got A equals RWXT, and G adding the sticky bit right down at the bottom. So that's just adding one bit to the group. So yeah, thank you, good point. You can actually, so you can add or subtract as well as set equal to.
Probably everyone knows this already, but only the owner of the file and group can change the permissions.
Yes.
It's funny, changing the permissions on a file, I always use the numbers, but for this stuff, I always use the letters.
Yeah, I generally will use the symbolics when I'm just trying to remove a particular or add a particular thing, and then the rest of the time I use numerics. All right, so that's all I have for the presentation. Do you guys want to have anything particularly you wanted to cover?
What would folks like to know about?
Fackles.
Apples.
Yay! I don't have a, yeah, this one, that's a bit of a bear.
Can I type?
Well, the first question is, which type of apple? Because there are many.
Yeah, actually.
But while they're figuring out how to talk about apples, to Michael's point, if you're writing an application, don't assume Unix permissions are the only ones that may be in effect. It's unclear what the right strategy is for dealing with this, but just keep it in mind.
You report back if you come up with something good.
Right.
So if you want to just tell me what to type on.
Well, okay, so here's a get fackle, and this is the default that every file gets. And this is just a re-reporting of the normal Unix standard permissions, user, group, and other. And we see that the owner is Brian and the group is Brian. What we can do at this point is add and the normal Unix permission manipulations will add and subtract things, and they'll all get reflected here. But then you can add extra users and add extra groups to these with different sets of permissions. And that's done with the set faculty group.
I know a different group on my system if you want me to add it.
Let's pull up the man page real fast.
All right, one thing I want to call out, we're running low on time. And we've still got one more presentation.
Hey, let's talk about AFS apples. They're easy. So this is I guess the thing is, right, setf ACL and getf ACL are for local file system ACLs.
And NFS.
Well, no,
NFS
NFS v4 has its own different ACLs for the NFS mounts that are then mapped to POSIX ACLs on the back end for an NFS server just wheel. AFS ACLs are great. There's 5 of them. And they're easy to understand. Yes, question.
So, who interprets these ACLs? Is it the file system driver?
Yes.
Or
It is in the kernel somewhere.
Because you said there are some file systems that use different sets.
All right, so
of
I was thinking of network file systems which have sort of different requirements because they have to support different operating systems simultaneously and many users. And so these vary by your network file system. So AFS and NFS v4 have file server enforced ACLs. NFS v3 has discretionary ACLs, so the client can enforce them or not. Who knows what SIFS does?
The reason I use fackles, the reason I use fackles usually is I work for a software company, so I go to clients and they can't change the permissions of the directory we're writing to so that the application can write to it, right? So you have to add the group and all that. They don't have that access. So for example, the WebLogic is running under admin, and I'm logged in as junior, right? And I want admin to log into junior. So what I do is I change the fackles on junior's directory so that this guy can write to that directory. So I don't have to add it to the group. I don't have to have root, right? We could be independent of all that, and we control the access to that. That's what we use that mostly. It's pretty cool. And I use it in Solaris, Linux. The only thing is that the file system has to support it. It has to be either enabled or by default supported.
All right, we're going to have to cut it off. Thank you very much, Aaron, Stephen, Jack. Next up we have Bill and Matt talking about BizTV. slides from the.
Now, do you want to speak about TV or
Yeah.
Xbox Media Center?
I can do either one, but I will go through the slides.
Well, let's go to the next
Yeah.
slide. Alright, let's start with Xbox Media Center. Who watches TV at home? Who watches movies at home? Alright, okay, good. Some people. Alan's saying, sort of. Who uses their computer to watch TV or movies? Some. Who's got a computer hooked up to their main TV? Small people, cool. So, Xbox Media Center came out of way back when the Xbox was originally released by Microsoft. Somebody worked out how to put Linux on it and then needed a media player to play DVDs and stuff on your Xbox. That's why it's called XBMC. Now it's been changed to Kodi. They've rebranded themselves. It's an open source project and it now runs on laptops, TVs, Android, Boxy, I think, and a few other weird platforms. You got anything to add to it?
XBMC?
Yeah.
Yeah, one other thing, and this may be in the slides, but XBMC, in addition to the general media on your hard drive, there's also a very rich plugin system that will allow you to do a number of additional things. One of them being you can add a number of streaming media sites that allow you to stream straight in the player. A lot of the popular ones are there, YouTube, Vimeo, and a couple of others. And then there are some other additional add-on repositories that are not in the regular TXBMC that will include some things like, at one point it was Hulu and a couple of the...
and Amazon.
Yeah, and a couple of the other...
Netflix?
Well, Netflix is an interesting one because up until like a couple months ago, you couldn't do it on Linux. So it does exist, but actually getting it to work required Windows or Mac for a long time because it hooked into Silverlight. They may have rewritten this now so that it uses Chrome instead.
But Hulu and Amazon can be used in here?
Yeah.
It used to be, Hulu used to work and Amazon
Yeah.
used to work, and then they
They broke.
changed their encryption algorithm and screwed us over.
Most of all of those are broken out. YouTube still works. Anything that's completely non-DRM still works.
So, Kodi, the Kodi Media Center is a really rich and visually beautiful way of looking at audio media. It can do cover art, it can fetch the information from IMDb. If you want a pretty interface to your media on your hard drive or streaming media, Kodi is the way to go.
Kodi is a distribution you put on the box?
Kodi is a program that runs on Linux. There's a distribution called OpenELEC, which is a bare metal Linux distribution with Kodi built into it.
Very impressive.
Does that come out of your thing?
Kodi also hooks into Plex, so if you have a Plex server, you can use Kodi as a front end for it, so you can have all of your legally backed up without breaking the DRM of your DVDs.
Oh yeah, can you play Blu-rays? Play Blu-ray movies.
I don't know about Blu-ray, I can't see why not. You can definitely play DVDs through Kodi. Do that all the time. I'm now going to move on to Myth TV because that's my passion, but unless Matt wants to throw something else in, so.
You can go first.
Okay, so Myth TV has been around for a long time. It's a DVR, a digital video recorder for Linux. It started off in the analog days, so you put an analog capture card in and it would record your shows off cable or off free over-the-air TV. These days with digital TV, you get a digital TV capture box and you get an MP2 stream which Myth TV just writes to the hard drive and does no processing on. It's scriptable, it's themable, it's this menu here with TV, music, videos. That's just an XML file. You can modify that. You can add in your own menu items, and you can launch. I get one of my menu items to launch XBMC or Kodi as a second media player. They have guide data, so you can either buy your guide data. I buy a subscription to Schedules Direct, which gives me all the guide data for all the channels in my area. I do over-the-air TV. You can also get all the guide data for cable TV. And with the guide data, you get, when you do your channel up and down, it tells you what channel you're going to jump to, it tells you what the program is. You can tell it to record anything with, in this case, it's recording Enterprise, Star Trek Enterprise. You can say record anything with the word Star Trek in it, and you'll get Star Trek Enterprise, Star Trek, whatever, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, whatever is on TV.
They're all good, as long as it's Star Trek.
That's right, as long as it's Star Trek. This is just something I grabbed off the web.
As long as it's not Voyager.
Now, I recently bought a Chromebox, $140 as a front end, back end. It's Intel, Celeron, dual processor. It's got 2 gig of RAM. It's got 16 gig solid state hard drive. Has Intel graphics, so the graphics drivers are all open source and part of the kernel. No hassles. It has video acceleration, video hardware acceleration for doing MPEG-2 and H.264 decode and display. It has HDMI out. So this is stuck to the back of my TV now and drives the HDMI input on the TV. It's great. I have an external USB 2 hard drive stuck on the back of the TV, which handles all of the main video files for this. It's pretty cool. I didn't realize you could do it over a USB 2.
What's the advantage of this over like a Roku or a Western Digital Live TV?
Because I can SSH into it and do whatever I want. I'll show you what's next. For a tuner, I have an HD home run, which takes over-the-air signals or cable TV signals, puts the MPEG stream on the network and over UDP, and so this can pick it up and record it or play it live, or you can have another box. You can have your laptop tune into the HD home run and stream the video from there as well.
When you say cable signals, you mean just the unencrypted basic cable?
My box will do unencrypted basic cable. The Silicon Dust, which makes the HD home run, has a cable card version as well, so you can get the encrypted channels.
A bit on the encrypted channel bit, you have the regular one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the HD Home Run Prime, which was released a while ago, does have the cable card support. It's pretty new because up until like I think 2011 or so, cable card restrictions forbade this kind of network streaming to begin with, and then they got eased out around that time. But nonetheless, in order to actually use HD Home Run Prime with MIF-TV, the copy flag on the program that the cable card decrypts needs to either be set to copy freely or I think copy once. And whether or not that is set is at the discretion of the cable provider. And when I was looking into this to replace my capture card setup with an HD Home Run Prime to make the administration easier, this will vary by geography, of course, but everything I came up for Time Warner says Time Warner just sets the flag for all of them to copy never. So something to keep in mind. I could be totally wrong about that, but I decided to not go that route if it's just going to be useless.
Pretty sure that's not true.
Well, what's
So we need somebody to buy an HD Home Run Prime and try it and come back and tell us.
I searched for Time Warner. I didn't get this region. I just got other Time Warner regions, but I assumed it was a similar setup across the board. I could be very wrong with that.
I've come across a couple things on the Time Warner that are copy never, but the majority of their things seem to be copy once.
Okay.
And
That's
the
good
broadcast channels I would copy freely.
Yeah, I would assume broadcasts would be copy freely, and even if they weren't, you could always just plug straight into the wire because they're unencrypted by law. Normally, those flags are supposed to be set for pay-per-view and HBO and stuff, but some cable providers just like to go free for all and forget everything, so to speak.
Non-free.
All right, so one of the questions was why is this any better than having a Roku or some other box, streaming media box? And the advantage is this can record TV. You can SSH into it if you want to, that's fun, but really this is a DVR and you don't need to have a Time Warner DVR sitting there. I have a TV mount on the wall and there is nothing underneath it. There's no table, nothing. It's just bare wall. So the kids can't grab and put cables. They don't get to play with the DVDs.
What are these kids you speak of?
I know. The other big advantage is like is it Dish TV? This thing will skip commercials. It'll find commercials in recorded programs and automatically skip them. So my wife goes to a friend's place and goes, "Why are we watching commercials?
I know, how could you do this? It's a waste of life."
What is this? What are these things? And I go, "Yeah, we don't watch them." Who has a remote control collection on their table? Who has an instruction manual in their remote control organizer to tell guests how to use their remote controls? Which one does what? One remote control to do everything. That's my aim, and that's what I've achieved. This is a Microsoft Media Center remote control. There are other remote controls that are compatible. There's an infrared receiver. The receiver has 2 infrared transmitters, so you can get them to turn on and off other equipment and control other equipment. But the really good thing about this is it works with Linux Infrared Remote Control, LIRC, which is a package which handles all of your remote controls and allows you to do funky things. So, Myth TV works out of the box with LIRC. So I install Myth TV and I pick up my remote and hey, it just works. Same with XBMC or Kodi. It just works. You pick up your remote, Kodi knows all the different types of remotes that are out there that people use and knows how to configure the buttons and it works. It's great. IRexec is a program that says when you press this button on the remote control, run this script. So when I press a button on my volume up on my remote, it tells LIRC to run a script which tells my TV to turn the volume up. It's great.
In Alan's case, he could press it or close his garage.
Good.
The thing about LIRC is when they say any remote, it literally means anything that will send infrared. So if there is, you can usually find pre-built remote control lists on the internet of someone who's gone through and pressed all of the buttons and made them do certain things. But if you don't come across them, you can generate one yourself using any remote you find anywhere. And then just dump it in somewhere.
There's a debug command called IRW, I think it is, that you run that command, you press the button on the remote, and it spits out on the console what the key press was. And then you can just take that string and stick it into your config file, and you're done. I have a Samsung TV. It has a EX Link socket in it. It's great. It's the service socket, or it's the hotel control socket. Basically, it's an RS-232 socket. You can send serial commands to the TV and tell the TV to do something. If you get into the service menu, you can actually turn this into a full bidirectional console to Linux that's running inside Samsung. So when the Samsung TV boots up, I get a full boot, Linux boot.
Like an airplane.
You would.
What do I do? I use bash. Alright, so I want to turn the TV off. I want to press the button on the remote and I want to turn that TV off. I know LIRC knows which button it is, and I have a config file that then runs this script. And all the script does is it echoes that string, which is actually a hex, set of binary data into the serial port, which goes to the TV. The red digits are the actual data, the actual code that I'm sending to the TV, and then the last byte is the checksum. Yeah, we gotta go. Why do we do this? I want to turn the TV off. I don't know what state the TV is in, but I want to turn it off. All right. So I can have a cron job that fires up and turns the TV off. If you send an infrared remote control signal, most remotes have one power button, which toggles the power on or off. But it doesn't know what state the TV is in.
Yeah.
So if you want more info, sorry Matt, go.
Oh, I was just saying, sometimes it's pretty easy to get this RH232 info, and sometimes it's not. My parents have a television, for example, where it's actually in the supplemental manual on the CD, which was quite nice. But then other times you have to just type in your model number and RH232 on the internet, and hopefully someone has found a manual somewhere. But that's actually pretty common in most flat screens to have that interface.
So it can play MP4s, ISOs, all of that stuff, play it off a network.
Against TV, yeah.
Yeah.
They both can.
Out of the box.
Yeah, they both can. Yeah.
AVIs, MOVs.
UKVs.
Out of the box, no plugins.
Out of the box. Cody does, yes.
Have you had problems with memory leaks, and how do you deal with them?
In XBMC, yes. I've actually graphed this over a week. Not literally graphed, I just took screenshots of HTOP for 7 days. But yeah, I can see it crawling to the point where it consumed all my RAM. I'm hoping they fix that.
Mr. TV? No.
But yeah, NetTV's
I haven't seen it, and I use Ubuntu, which when the front end crashes, it restarts automatically and comes back up to the main menu, so I don't get yelled at.
That's another thing about NetTV. If you can separate both ends, you can have the back end, which actually does the recording bits, and then you can have the front end, which does the viewing.
Or multiple front ends. So
Yeah, you can have multiple back ends, multiple front ends, whatever you want. Or you can just put them both in the same box.
Do you think it's pricey, $140 for that little device?
I think it's really good for a Celeron dual core box.
That's this big.
Tell my wife that. I want to take you home.
So, if you wanted to summarize in like 2 to 3 sentences, what would you say the difference is between the TV and
TV is a DVR program. It's concentrated around TV recording, scheduling recordings. Xbox Media Center, or Kodi, is a media player with plugins.
And it's worth noting, one of these plugins will plug into NetTV, so you can watch your NetTV stuff right on Kodi if you want.
So Kodi can be a front end to MIT. And that's it.
Any other questions?
No time. Battle wings.
What do you use for ripping DVDs?
I don't read DVDs.
All right, thank you very much, everyone. Hope this has been informative and enjoyable for you guys. As we mentioned at the beginning, we are going to Bottle Wings around the corner of the Mission Valley Shopping Center. Just go straight out the driveway, so you can't go anymore, hang a left, and the shopping center on the corner is Mission Valley, and there you'll find Bottle Wings.